Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Beyond Terrain podcast. I'm your host, Liam Dalton. Today, we're going to have a super cool episode talking about one of the topics that I love most. One of the topics that sort of got me into this whole terrain paradigm and really solidified it for me. We'll be talking about some sort of ancestral wisdom, nutrition, everything along the lines there. This was really one of the things that hit it home for me um, when studying, going against the germ theory and things like that. I found a lot of truth in sort of the ancestral tradition and learned a lot from sort of the native groups around me here. And it's just, it was some of the most helpful things that I've ever learned, and quite beautiful teachings. And to give the time of day is one of the most helpful things I can do to, anybody can do really to broaden their horizon. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion today. We have a fantastic guest on, somebody who's been very well traveled, very well esteemed, has lots of accomplishments. So I'm really looking forward to this one today. We have Suzanne Alexander on. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so grateful that you asked to have me on here, and I'm just so blessed. Thank you, honey.
Certainly. So the question I ask all my guests at the very start of the episode to get a good baseline, and I'm really looking forward to asking you this question. I like to ask, what is health? To sort of get a definition of what health is, what it means, how it manifests, and sort of everything that goes along with it. So I'm really looking forward to hearing your answer.
That's a brilliant question because it's really all that I've been searching for since I was born. So let me unfold it for you. It's like, oh golly, I shouldn't have asked that question. She rambles, but oh, it's so multifaceted, and I mean, there's just so many pillars of health. And I'm going to probably touch on things that people haven't even considered, but it's what I've learned in my 63 years of researching and living with tribes, and it's been a long road, but I really think I finally found it. I just returned from Africa, living with 7 tribes there, and that was profound. And hopefully you'll see how it all melds together. So health to me is, again, there's pillars. And so you're going to have the spiritual, you're going to have the emotional, the physical, even financial is a piece of health that people don't talk about. And there's just this, and of course, the people you're with, it's what you see, what you hear, what you're exposed to, all of these pieces, in our environment. It's just so many pieces. And now with social media, so many of my clients are just falling apart. And that's one of the pillars that I'm just saying, maybe that needs to kind of be taken away a bit, because the stress that's causing, and stress is such a huge piece to our health. And when I lived with the tribes, it was so profound when I was there, being out in the bush. We were so far away from civilization. There's no electricity, there's no running water, there's nothing. You in nature, you in the wildness, and the potential of being killed at any moment. But there was a sense of peace that I never, well, let me go, because I did experience a sense of peace, which we'll talk about eventually. It was, I had a near-death experience where I was leaving my body, and we'll get to that if you want to talk about that. And that was the most profound sense of peace that you can't even explain to anyone. And when you are there in that moment, it's that you don't want to come back. Even though I have my family here, it was like I had never, you think about peace and you think you have it at this moment, but when you are in that peace that you are leaving your body and you're dying, there is a greater being. There's no question about it. The other side is something that I can't wait to one day be there with my family members who have already gone. It was so peaceful. And so that's what I strive to get in my life now. And when I was in Africa, and even in the Pacific Islands and the different tribes I've lived with, the sense of peace that they have, I think, is one of the big reasons why they're so healthy. And those who say that the tribes, that they don't live long, you are so wrong. It's been misinterpreted in terms of the data, because they take a median of the children, so many die at birth and when they're 1-2 years old, because of predators getting them, diseases, those kinds of things take them. If you can get past that, they're living well into their 80s, 90s, and 100s. And I met with so many in their hundreds, and they are not at all what we see in our cultures in terms of aging. They don't age like we do. And yes, it's based on so many factors, which we'll talk about when I'm talking about the pillars of health. But going back to the sense of peace, when I was there, even though I was 24/7 in this feeder mode of, is there going to be a cobra? Is there going to be pythons? Is there going to be poisonous, insects? Anything, malaria. I was covered with insect bites, just covered, thinking, am I going to get malaria? But yeah, I was in this peace. Every morning I was just like, oh my gosh, this is just unbelievable. There was no EMFs. I didn't have heart palpitations. I'm so hypersensitive to electromagnetic fields. I'm so hypersensitive. And it was so profound to me that this is such an important piece. When you go to sleep at night, and of course you're getting up in the morning with the sun, 5 o'clock in the morning, everyone's rising, you're living out there, and when that sun is coming up, you're rising. And when the sun is setting, there's no street lights. There's nothing except the moon and the fire that's going, that flickering. It was so peaceful, Leah. I can't describe. If I can always just say to people, you need to experience if possible. Yes, there is a different way to this, and we'll talk about this. It's because you have to. There's no bathroom. The bathroom is the great outdoors. You have to know how to squat. If you can't squat, you're sunk. And so many people who want to go on my expeditions with me, when I explain to them they have to squat, they can't go because they can't squat. And it's so interesting. I'm making a video that I'll be posting this weekend about this, is that when we squat, and that's one of the pillars of health, we've forgotten what it means to be human. And to be human involves squatting. And all the indigenous tribes do this because they don't have a bathroom. And even you'll hear me asking on because I have live videos of the tribes. No one else is doing this. And it's so profound to hear the wisdom of these elders talking about, and I'll ask them questions that are quite embarrassing, but I'm a researcher and I have to know. And I'll say to them, they're in their hundreds, can you still squat to go to the bathroom? Think about people, even 20, 30-year-olds cannot squat. When I was teaching, I would have 5-year-olds come into my classroom. I'd say, let's squat. They couldn't squat anymore because their Achilles tendon shortens up. And they could squat. So I had to teach them over the weeks. We're going to build this. We're going to work it out because we need to squat. Like my granddaughter, when she was 15 months old, and I have pictures of this, she dropped right into a squat. I had never taught her. She had just always been watching me because that's all I do is squat. And she dropped right into it. And it's normal. It's in our DNA to squat. And people think, well, how can it be part of our health? Research has actually been done. When we're sitting in the squatting position, I can't tell you how many benefits it does to our health. Not only when we're going to the bathroom, it opens up the colon and it makes it straight instead of getting a kink in it. So when we're sitting on the toilet, we're getting a kink, and so we're not able to defecate completely. And so not only that, but when they're sitting in that squatting position, it's called an active resting position. So you're constantly working the muscles. When we sit in a chair, we're in, like, when they're in space, they're in like I can't think of the word I'm thinking. It's just like they're kind of floating, and it literally impacts the bones. Your bones become soft, and they're not working, and your muscles, and we become. But when you're in the active position, so God doesn't make mistakes when he designs us. This is what we're supposed to do when we go to the bathroom. Even when I'm in my bathroom here, I have a squatting thing to help me squat. I don't want to sit. So I'm very ancestral. I've been this way since I was a little girl. So that's a piece of it. We need to be squatting, because if you can't, and you're really out in the wild and you're living as a human, you're sunk. You have to squat all the way up into your however old you're going to be. So picture our people who are now, where we're living in our culture, where they're 40, 50, and you ask them to squat, they can't do it. They need to hang on to something. There's not really anything to hang on to when you're out in the bush. You go behind something, you're just hoping you got to go. And so that's a really important piece, is that that to me is a very important piece. But also, it's how you think, the people you're around. And when you're within the tribe and you're living ancestrally, there's no jealousy, there's no bitterness, there's no anger, there's no envy, there's just none of this that we experience. When you're watching social media, you see nothing but mean, hurtful statements. I mean, you've got the vegans and the carnivores, everyone's competing, and they're saying such hurtful things to about each other. Why? Why can't we just be happy to say, we're all trying to find what's best for us? We want to eat
That's true.
healthy. It doesn't matter who's eating what. Who cares what someone's eating as long as they're trying to take care of this temple that we've been blessed with? And to understand we don't want the processed foods. We don't want to have the glyphosate laden food that's killing our gut microbiome. There's so much to this. And so, but to me, the most important piece to me is faith. If you have faith, you can get through anything. And I've had many moments in my life of almost dying. And I had such faith that God had a plan for me. And in every one of those moments, it was a learning moment, and He brought me through it. And I became so stronger, healthier, filled with wisdom, where I knew exactly the path I needed to go. And the doctors would always be saying to me, "You need a blood transfusion, you're dying." I said, "No, if this is God's will, thy will be done." And they were shocked. Okay, and His will was always, I would recover stronger than ever and move on. And I always heard His word. And so I think that to me, for my body, faith is my most important thing. I live with every day. Gratitude. If we have gratitude, we're living in the state of thankfulness. If you're living in a negative state, I think that's very detrimental to our health. It's so detrimental. People are just so negative and anti. When I was modeling and performing and in pageants and all the things I've done in my life, I've had quite a unique life. God had so many plans for me. And whenever I was around the people in this realm of the different professions, I was so shocked how I felt. Whether I was on stage for pageants or performing in operas or modeling, it was so cutthroat, so backstabbing, so full of greed and jealousy, and everyone had to be the best. Everyone had to win. Everyone had to. And I just kept saying to my parents, "This isn't healthy." And they said, "But look at the money you're making." And I said, "But money means nothing to me. It's my health that's the most important to me. My health is my wealth." And they're like, "You're going to give up all this?" And I said, "Yeah." And they're like, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I'm going to go become a teacher." And they're like, "A teacher?" And they were all educators. All my family's all been educators. And why? There's no money in that. I said, "But that's the point." I said, whenever I'm around children, they're the angels that have been set on this earth to remind us to remain pure and clean in our heart and our thoughts. And that's who I want to be around. It's the adults that are toxic. And they're like, "Really?" So I went back to school again. Here I had I had my opera degree. I had all these degrees. I'm going back again. There's not enough. I can never get enough education and knowledge. So I went back and became a teacher. And so for over 30 years, I was in the classroom teaching all at different ages. And it was so profound to learn from them and their little innocent wisdom. And I was so at peace if I could just close my door and not have to and their parents were so, so wonderful. We had such a wonderful family relationship. But I taught them ancestral living. I taught them ancestrally. I taught them ancestral history. I've been studying about the tribes since I was 5. My grandmother, an educator, also lived in Africa for 3 years with different tribes. And so she would come home and I would sit at her feet as a little girl. And I was so sickly, Leah. I was so sickly. And I said, "Grandma, are the tribes sickly like me?" And she said, "No." And I knew at that point there was something about them. And I said, "What do they eat?" And she explained to me, "Oh, brains." And she said they eat meat. They harvest the baboons and they're eating all of these animals and they're digging tubers. And I said, "But they don't eat Captain Crunch and they don't eat all the things that we're eating and all these box things." And she said, "Oh no, everything's from nature." Now, my father, an educator, but was also a rehabilitator for wild animals. So we raised wild animals as well. Notice where God put me, the family he put me in. He had a plan for me. Even with all my health problems, I had to have those because I had to learn to figure out why I had them so I could teach people now. And so I would take care of the animals, and my father would say, bring home books. So at 5 years old, I'm bringing home books from the library about all the different animals to learn about their habitats and their species-specific diet. And we would study them, and then this is the food we'd feed them. We'd have to provide them. They were little brand new born babies who'd lost their moms that were killed on the highways, and we had to know what to give them. And so I lived and learned from the animals. They were like my siblings. They taught me how to climb trees. They taught me how to grab, crayfish and things out of streams, because my favorites were raccoons. I love the raccoons and the skunks and the deer. They were so wonderful. But they taught me so much about being an animal. We're an animal. And this is how we live. They eat, depending on the species, they eat different things. And the season, it's very seasonal. We have to eat seasonally from where we are living. But they were so profound. So finally by 10, I'm so sick at this point. And my father was very sickly. I have his genetic genes, of course. And I said, Dad, I think I know why we're sick. Now, he had his doctorate from Columbia University, and he was very brilliant. He would bring home rats and things from the labs that were dying of cancer. And we would try to rehabilitate them, but most of the time it was too late. We couldn't. They were just so sick. And I said, I think I know why we're sick. And he said, really, why? My first hypothesis. And I said, it's the food. I said, Dad, I can't even describe. I can't even pronounce half of the words on the ingredients on this box. And I said, and yet our animals, we're feeding them their species-specific diet. You're always adamant we have to feed them that. And I said, and Grandma tells me about all the tribes she's living with, and they're eating their species-specific diet. But we aren't. We're animals too, and we're just like the tribes. Why aren't we eating like the tribes? And he said, point taken. And so from that point on, I kept searching and removing. And then I went on to study for my PhD as well in health and nutrition. So now I'm here at 63, and now I truly believe I know what health is. And everyone's like, well, what's the right food? What is the right food? It depends on our polymorphisms. You and I were talking, and we both have Scottish and Irish backgrounds. If you look back 6,000, 7,000 years ago in Ireland, most of their food that they were eating, and people think that they were all about grains and so forth. No, they were farmers. They were mostly raising sheep and goats, cattle, livestock, and they were eating meat and dairy. They would have a little bit of oats, but that was mostly their prime diet. And then you move forward, and then they started bringing in wheat and grains, which they weren't used to. And many of the celiac genes are from Ireland. When you go back, and I have celiac disease. And so I traced it back to that genetic DNA. So when you said that, I thought, gee, we should have your DNA. Have you done your DNA yet?
No, I
Oh
haven't,
my gosh,
no.
I'd love to know. We should, when we're done, honey, I'd love to have you tell me the locations, if you know where there's
Sure.
locations of where your family are. 'Cause, oh my gosh, I'm so into all of this, darling. But anyway,
Cool.
and so when anyone is specifically saying this is the only food that we should be eating, whether it's vegan, and I've been vegan, I've tried vegan, I was that for 25 years, and it's profound. It's profound because we take out all the toxins, we take out all of the processed food, but over time, and even though I was doing it correctly, I mean, I know what I'm doing. It was not the processed food vegan. It was the whole foods from the earth, what God created for us. But even though I was taking supplements, my body could not handle supplements. And we have to have B12. B12 is an adamant. You have to have that. Even though there's they say vitamin A, the carotenoids, and most of us cannot convert carotenoids into vitamin A, the true vitamin A, retinoic acid. And so that's animal-based. But anyway, so I tried so hard to maintain that diet, but I couldn't. And that takes us to where I almost died. So at about 48, I made a really bad mistake. I put breast implants in. All I can say is no one, I don't care if you've had double mastectomies, breast implants are so toxic. Even though I put the saline ones in, I felt, well, I'm safe. And I asked my surgeon, but the outside is still silicone. Oh, no, no, no worries, no worries. I trusted. I trusted. And within a month of having them put in, I couldn't breathe anymore. And here I'm an opera singer. I kept saying to my daughters, I can't breathe. And they're like, Mom, you're almost 50. Almost 50. You're getting old. I said, no, there's something wrong. And as the years kept going on, it kept getting worse and worse, where I literally could not sleep. I was suffocating at night. I was literally suffocating. 10 years after I turned 57, about 57, 58, and my lab work was coming back horrible, horrible. No white blood cells, no red blood cells, no platelets. I'm dying. I'm at hematology, oncology doctors. They're all saying, we think you've got something, some kind of cancer from the implants. You've got to take them out. We don't know. I was like, are you kidding me? Oh my gosh. So I found the best surgeon in the world. It's all she does is remove breast implants. And I got in there and she saw my lab work. And of course, I'm 5'8". I weighed 95 pounds. I was tiny, tiny, tiny as could be. I was eating 3,000 calories a day. I could not digest. So she says, I can't do surgery on you. You'll die. And I'd had a premonition I was going to die before I left. So I had gone to see my attorney and had my will redone. So that, because my husband had left us years and years and we'd never seen him again. So I raised my girls by myself. And thus the implants, because I had been brainwashed to believe that I was too hideous and that no one would ever want me because I had nursed my daughters for 3 years each because it's ancestral. And you aren't perky anymore. And so everyone's like, you got to start dating. I said, oh no, I'm hideous. I'm hideous. Do something about it. Do something about it then, thinking that, and of course, going against the Bible, God doesn't make mistakes. We're perfect as we are. We are perfect as we are. So anyway, girls, don't let anyone try to dissuade you from thinking that you're something that you're not. But anyway, so I begged Dr. Fang to do the surgery. I said, please, we have to get them out. And I said, I know if it's God's plan, whatever thy will be done. And she said, goes against all but she says, we got to get them out. We got to get them out of there. So she gets them out and it's kind of like having a mastectomy because you have all these drains coming out of you and it's all the fluids and all the blood that's coming out. So you have to wear those. So I'm in recovery and the nurses are monitoring me. And all of a sudden one says, oh my gosh. And I'm like, what? And she said, I think you're bleeding internally. I'm like, what does that mean? What? And she goes, I can't. She goes, your drains are filling up too fast. I've got to get the surgeon. So Dr. Fang comes in. Now it's the middle of the night. And she's like, oh my gosh, you're bleeding internally. And she goes, this is what I feared. I feared this was going to happen. She goes, you have no white blood, so nothing that's going to clot. You're not going to coagulate. And she's like, oh. So she's a tiny little tiny woman and she gets up on a stool. And of course we have to get a whole new surgical team. They've all gone home. And so and I will not take anything. I will not take any painkillers. I don't believe in that. And of course, the pain was horrendous, just horrendous. So it got me on the IV. She's pushing on to try to keep my chest cavity from filling up with the blood. And it's coming out, it's coming out, it's coming out of the drains. And I can hear them saying, she's lost 40%. She's lost 50%. And by 50%, you're close to death. And that's when I kept saying, I could feel myself leaving. And she's going, I'm not going to lose you. I'm not going to lose you. She goes, you may be the smallest woman I've ever met, but you're the strongest. I said, it's okay. I could hear myself talking to them, but yet now I can kind of see them. I'm above myself. You know what I mean? And I can all hear, she's going, I'm not losing you. I'm going, I think they can hear me, but I don't know. I'm saying, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. Oh my gosh. It's okay. I'm great. This is beautiful. It's so peaceful. Oh my, and I just kept saying, just tell my daughters how much I love them. It's so beautiful here. It's so beautiful. And then it went black. And then all of a sudden I'm back in recovery. And I'm saying, what happened? And they're like, you lost so much blood. We almost lost you. And I said, I know. Why didn't you let me go? And she said, Dr. Fang would never lose anybody. And they're like, why? What happened? So I told them, and they're like, oh my gosh. So anyway, so then Dr. Fang came in and she said, that was the closest thing I've ever to losing anyone. And she said, "You are the most powerful woman I've ever met in my life. How did you survive this?" And I said, "God's plan. He's not ready for me. He has other things I have to accomplish." And she says, "Well, if that's going to happen, you need a blood transfusion right now." I said, "No." I said, "He will heal me." And so he did. But anyway, so with that said, honey, I just think that with faith and that we take care of ourselves, we know not to put chemicals in our body. We know to eat from the earth. We listen to our bodies. It gives us signals every single day. If you have an ache and make or pain, then ask yourself, what have I ingested? Have I been around people who have been making me feel less of who I am? Am I on social media too much? Am I grounding outside? Every morning I get up, and I've been doing this forever. I'm barefoot out in the yard. Even if it's snow out, I'm in the snow barefoot. You know snow. We know what it is. I don't care what the temperature is. I'm out barefoot, and I'm out grounding. I'm meditating. I'm in nature. The trees give off what's called phytoncides. All plants give off its phytoncides. It's a special healing chemical that we breathe in. Research has been done on this over and over in Japan, and it is proven beyond a reasonable doubt that when we are in nature and we're breathing these healing properties in from the trees and from the plants, it's healing. It can heal cancer, depression, high blood pressure. It is so healing to our body. And so I spend a lot of my time out in nature with wild. And again, another piece why I believe the tribes are so healthy. There's so many, again, the pillars, but I think that when we think about this again, faith, gratitude, peace, having surrounded with wonderful, loving people, no toxic people, take ourselves away from social media as much as possible. EMFs, don't have the Wi-Fi going in your home. I'm all hardwired, so I don't have Wi-Fi. Even with my phone, I'll show you, I can't even touch my phone. I have it on this because if I touch it, my hands burn. My fingers, and my granddaughter will actually start peeling the skin off of right if I've touched it where it starts to burn. So I always hold my phone, and I try not to keep it hardly at all near me anyway. But so that's what I don't even touch that. But in financial, let's talk about financial health. If people think I don't think about this, but even I've been with some of the wealthiest people in the world, and they're some of the most unhappy, unhealthy people I know. And when I talk to them, I'll say, "Why do you think that is?" And they'll stop and think. And they'll say, "Honestly, do you know what it feels like every day to wonder if the people around you are only there because of your money? You don't know if anyone genuinely loves you for you." And I said, "I know exactly what you're talking about because when I was in the limelight, I always wondered the same thing. Does anyone love me for me? Or is it because of who I am and what I'm accomplishing?" And that was what a horrible existence to live like that. And so I think financial, but then there's also the piece of, do I have enough money to survive? Because there's that stressor. If I can't, because I look at my daughters, and, they're at the age, one's 28, my youngest is 28, my oldest is 30. And they're at this point where they're very successful. They're very financially stable, but the cost of living is insane. What they're paying for rent is more than a mortgage. But because they're paying so much for rent and for food now, it's just insane, the cost of food. And for, their health insurance and all these things that we have to have now, they can't even try to put enough money aside to put a down payment on a home. And so there's that piece of trying to find a balance of, am I going to ever be able to have my own home? Because that's a stressor. So it's all, again, financial situation is going to cause stress, whether you're wealthy, whether you're poor, even moderate income. Can we survive in this economy? And so that's another factor of the impact it has on our health. But for me, I've had both. I've been all over the place. And now I'm retired, except I'm retired from teaching, but now I'm moving on into my new phase of my research. And so, but I'm living so profoundly in a peaceful state off of my pension, which is enough. When I travel, I don't ask anyone to help me to pay. God finds ways for me to afford things. And it's been miraculous. When I'm on social media, I'm not selling anything. I would never ask anyone for money. I just give them my knowledge. I share it with them what I know, and it's a gift. It is a gift because God gives me gifts every day. And I think that just to know that that's such a piece for my health is I'm giving back because He gives me so much, so much. But I'll be quiet, honey, because I know I've been rambling.
No, that's amazing. Appreciate that. I appreciate you sharing all that.
You're welcome.
That and it always comes back to that ancestral way of life, what you're talking about here, right? Like financial health, of course. I'm glad you brought that up. We speak about that a little bit too, right? And it's more of a mindset thing than how much money you're making, right? It's being able to afford the lifestyle that you're destined to live too. But like you said, like uh, faith first, spiritual first approach. We talked about that with Connie Strassheim because and it's so important when you're aligned in the spiritual realm, everything else will
It
align around it, you
totally
know?
does.
And so this ancestral way of life is really conducive to this, I think, because it's easy to live in harmony, live in the moment, and you're grateful for every day that you wake up because like you said, there's so many things that can happen on a daily basis. You never know what can happen. And so you need to have faith. You need to have, some sort of understanding that there is a path for you, that there is a way forward that is destined and meant to be. So I think that's beautiful. I think that's really amazing. And I really
It-
appreciate you sharing that story because it's so
it-
profound. It's a story you hear all the time.
it's
Yeah.
so
So
true. And it's interesting when you're with the tribes. And I asked all of them. You can see all these videos for yourself. Because I don't ever want anyone to think I'm skewing things based on my biases. I'm not a biased person. I'm there as a researcher, and that's why I became an independent researcher. Because when I'm working with other people, everyone's got their own agenda. But no, we've got to find this. We've got to prove this. Oh, no, 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 no. I'm going to tell the truth. And so then I let the tribe speak, and people can hear the tribe speak. They can hear the truth for themselves, and then they can make their choice because I go to different tribes, and all the different tribes have their different perspectives. And so everyone eats differently depending on the region. But what they all have in common is the sense they live for the moment. They do not think about tomorrow. They don't think about next month, next year. They're living for this second. And they get so much out of it. And they care so much. And another powerful piece too is to have a purpose. Every single person, including those who are 100 years old, have a purpose. When I look at our world that's modernized, and you think about how awful it is that we take our family members and we put them in homes. And I talked to the elders about this, and they were horrified. What? How can that be? You can't do that. I said, I know. And I'm part Native American. And so I know in the native tribes where I'm from, that the same thing. The elders are revered, and their wisdom is so powerful to the youth and those in the middle, and they all live together because that those elders are going to help to raise the children and educate them and take all the knowledge that's been handed down from generation to generation, and that's taught, and that gives them a purpose to live, to stay healthy. If we just toss people away and they no longer have a purpose, I can't tell you how fast I've seen people die within 6 months of being put in a home. There's no purpose to live. And if we know, I mean, I can't imagine, and I know people that are my age that are living in homes. And I feel like I'm 20. I'm healthier now than I was as a 20-year-old. I mean, I lift more. I climb trees faster. I sprint faster. Everything I do, it's so much better than I did when I was younger because I have this belief that I get better. I don't grow old. I get better. And so when I'm 100, I can't imagine how healthy I'm going to be. With that mindset, think what we can do. Our mind, my father was brilliant, and he was just a brilliant man. And he was like, I just looked up to him so he could do anything. And here's an amazing story. He loved his Harley motorcycle. He was always out riding his motorcycle. And so one day he was in a horrible accident because we lived up in the mountains, and he was driving on a winding road, and a car was coming around the bend, and he couldn't see his blind spot, but they were in his lane. And his bike was 1,200 pounds, massive Harley he was riding. But he was covered in full leather, always wore in full leather. But he tried to lean the bike over to miss the car. But it's 1,200 pounds, and somehow it landed and it slammed into his arm. The bone came out of his arm. All the tendons and ligaments came ripping out of his arm. He survived it. But here's the great thing about the power of the mind. And this is where I learned this. So the surgeon finally arrives at the hospital, and he says, "You'll never have use of this arm again." My father was a brilliant pianist as well. And of course, he was always working out, always lifting weights and so forth. And he's like, he was like me. You tell him something, you don't believe it because God has a plan. So they did the surgery, and they tried to sew all the ligaments, everything back to where they're supposed to be, and tried to, realign the arm and put him in the cast. And he said, it's going to be at least 6 months to a year if this heals. Well, my father didn't believe it. And he went home, and I remember I'd see him sitting in his chair, and he'd be willing it, visualizing it, healing. And I said, "Dad, what are you doing?" And he says, "Your brain can heal anything." And he says, "I'm willing and seeing the bones are mending, all the nerves are coming together." He went back for a 6-week checkup. They did the x-ray. It had completely healed. And the doctor said, "I've never seen anything like this in my life." And he was back to playing the piano as if nothing had ever happened. So again, our mind, if we tell ourselves, because we've been led to believe we're supposed to be like this when we age, you're just growing old, then our mind starts to believe it. But if we are around people who have the mindset, I can do all because God doesn't make mistakes. He designed us so perfectly. And therefore, we can overcome anything, but we have to take care of it. We just can't say, well, I can just go and eat whatever we want. I can just sit around. We are moving. It's another thing. Movement. This tribes, they walk at least 12 miles a day. At least. They are not sitting. And according to if they're sitting, they're either squatting or they're on the ground. They're not sitting in chairs. And all of this matters. They're grounding. They're in nature. They're breathing in. Microbiome. Let's talk about microbiome. I'll stop. Anything you want to say, honey? Because the microbiome is huge when it comes to the tribe.
Oh, keep going. I want to hear about the microbiome.
Well, the Hadzabi, they're some of the last of the hunters and gatherers, and I lived with them. They're all so adorable. They're so adorable. I just love them so. And they're known to have the most profound microbiome of all the people in the world. And the research shows. Now, the researchers all believe it's because they eat a lot of plants. And they do. About 60% of their diet is plants. Even though they're hunters and those who are carnivore, they're out hunting. They're what? Yes, that would be their first thing. They would love to have that. But they're hunting with bows and arrows. And I know when we went hunting, it was slim pickings. And I witnessed it. We'd see the tracks of the antelope and maybe hyena, but they don't eat hyena. But there was nothing to be seen. We got a bird, a red-billed hornbill. It's about this big. And we'd already walked probably 8 or 9 miles, and they're getting hungry. They made a little fire. And we ate. We cooked it. There wasn't much to it. And here's another piece. So I've got a video of this. I took my phone camera, I put it into the mouth of Pele, who is one of the hunters, and he literally has a bone, and their teeth are gorgeous. Of course, that to me is a sign of how healthy we are, how white our jaw is, our teeth are, pristine. And they don't go to the dentist. They don't, He takes this he's got the bones, the same thing I'm eating and stuff. And he puts it in his mouth and he's grinding through it. I'm like, wait, I've got the camera. And he's laughing away. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're literally pulverizing this bone. The jaw strength that they have. And that's another aha moment. I'm thinking, I don't eat tough things like this. Everyone, we want to have, our meat has to be so well cooked and this and that. And of course I'm doing mostly ground meat, because it's cheaper. And, I'm thinking I'm not working my job. And yet when I was vegan, I was always making sure, because I knew that we had to be chewing. So I was always eating really hard carrots and things. But to get to the point of the bones, I thought, okay, I've got to get to that point. I've got to be ancestral. They're eating the bones too. But anyway, so the more and more I'm living with them, and I'm watching, it's not the plants. They're living in such a filthy environment. They're drinking out of mud puddles. They're drinking out of any stagnant water they can find. There's not clean water anywhere to be found. It's not, beautiful springs and things. We didn't find springs. It was just stagnant water, mud puddles, things like that. The knives that they carry, the machetes and things that they carry, they're never washed. So we slaughter an animal, put that right back in. If the dogs, they have their packs of dogs with them, the dogs might lick it. Who knows what the dogs have? Worms, all the things we're eating raw organs. I mean, we're not washing our hands. We're going to the bathroom out in the bush. There's no sink there to wash, And so I'm thinking to myself, this is the gut microbiome. God designed us to have such a powerful immune system that if we're healthy, we can overcome so many things in our environment. Again, if it's a healthy environment. Now, when it comes to glyphosate, remember, this is glyphosate-free environment. Nothing's been touched. It's as you're going back thousands of years when you're out in the bush. But then I come home, even though I don't put glyphosate or any chemicals in my yard or in my home, I don't use anything. But I can't control what my neighbors do, which means I'm breathing that in, destroying my gut microbiome. And I do tests on me all the time. I'm my own guinea pig. And even though I only buy organic even still uses pesticides. And so anyone who thinks when you're eating organic, the only way you're going to know exactly what's on your food is if you grow your own or you're living out in the bush. Or out in the Pacific Islands where, let me tell you, the food was unbelievable. Talk about ancestral food. I was so alive. It was either fruits in the Pacific Islands, olive. It was, and even like the tubers in Africa, when they would pick the tubers from the ground, and some of these we just chew. And talk about chewing, they're so fibrous and you can't even begin to swallow them anyway. But they're so hydrating, they're so full of water. And the minerals that were in these were unbelievable. And I kept saying, I couldn't, my body was just felt so nutrient filled compared to, even though I try to buy the best food in the world that I can get here, it doesn't come close to what you have when you're living ancestrally. And that's another piece. So there's so many factors, that it's difficult to overcome in our environment because of the toxins and pollutants that we are subjected to, whether it's EMFs, glyphosates, whatever it is, and toxic people and thinking, what we're watching, all of those things are destroying us. So we have to get to a point. I don't have a TV in my home. I took that out when my girls were little girls. And everyone's like, that was mean. I said, no, it was the greatest move we ever made. I mean, think about this. I remember one night the girls were little and we're sitting down watching TV and the characters were so rude. The women and the children in the family were degrading the man, belittling him. And I looked at my daughters and I said, guys, I wouldn't invite these people in my home. I said, they are not honoring this man. That goes against everything I believe in what the Bible says. I said, I can't condone this. I said, let's try to live without a TV and see what life is like. Let's be ancestral. And they were game. And so we did, and I gave the TV away. some other family that wanted it. And I've never gone back. It's the most profound, one of the most profound things I've ever done, because I don't have to be watching the bad news. I don't have to, and I don't really go on social media much, just to post my things and I'm off. I don't want to be subjected to that. I mean, I left the toxic world of performing and all of those things I was doing to teach my angels. And and even Leah, when I go and tour with Dr. Kenobi, and we go and we tour to present at conferences and so forth, I'm amazed. Even though I'm around people who are promoting health, it's a toxic environment because everyone is so, the competition. It's my way. I'm the best. I'm the most. It's my hypothesis. It's this and that. And I look at Chris, Dr. Kenobi, and I say, this isn't a healthy environment. Not at all. I said, there's the competition here, the greed, I said, this is the jealousy. I said, this is not healthy, and Chris will laugh and he agreed. I mean, it's the same thing. And so these are just things that we really have to reel in, because when you are with the tribes, again, there's none of that. The women, and there's no sexual connotations for everything, nothing. Many of the tribes don't wear any clothes. That was a little bit tough for me to get used to because I'm not used to that. But when you're eventually within about 24 hours, it's like, okay, I'm okay with this. I'm okay seeing this. But the men are not sexualizing the women. They see them as, this is the food source for our children. There's not, it's so, this is how we're supposed to be. Why have we become so toxic in how we think? The men don't have impure thoughts. And it's so beautiful. There's just, I tell you, I can't tell you, there's so many facets to being human. And that's one of them. It's not toxic, and nothing that they think is toxic. It's so pure. And I wish I could, I hope I'm conveying this enough, but it's just profound. And women have their role. Women are women and men are men. They protect, they provide. And women, they raise their children. And yes, there's a bit difference. Like the Hadzabe are monogamous. They have one wife. And most of the other tribes are polygamous. The men have multiple wives. And so there is a difference with that, which was very difficult for me because I'm very biblically based, monogamy. But in talking with them, it makes sense. Why? Because especially with many of the tribes are pastoralists and they raise livestock. And they have to have many people to help tending to their herds. And so it made sense to me. But I still struggle with it. I still struggle seeing multiple wives for one man. That's tough for me. It works for them.
Definitely. And like that's the beauty of it too, is there's so many different ways of life that are conducive to nature,
Yeah.
right? Like even when one of the first books I read on the topic was Weston A. Price. I think that's
Oh,
everyone's
yeah.
first
Here's
book
my
on the
kid.
topic,
Oh.
right? The what was so interesting about reading that book is like, going into it, I thought, oh, all of our ancestors ate cows, you know what I mean? Some ridiculous thought. Then you read it and they're like, oh no, some eat like purely they only eat fish or they eat rodents. And Aborigines in Australia, they eat rodents and or what we would consider rodents, right? Like foolish way of it's our way of thinking, right? Is different
Absolutely.
than
It's what we know.
our way of thinking is so different than what's conducive to nature. We've created these stories and we're so dogmatic in our thinking now too that we view their food source as a rodent, right? It's just like
And
undesirable. It's
it's
like when we call something a weed, right? We spray glyphosate on it. It's like,
yes, and it's so true. And because when I, especially like in on social media, again, let's go back to that, is that they talk about, because some of them, and I've seen the tribes, they eat insects.
yeah,
And people who are mocking and saying, oh, who could ever do that? This is a huge source of food for some of these tribes. And even the Hadzabe talk about rodents. The females, people don't think of, they always think that the women are the gatherers. But the women, their big thing is they'll go out and look for rodents. And I couldn't believe how fast they catch them. I'm like, gosh, you guys are quick. Golly, that's amazing. And they'll cook them and they eat them. It's a wonderful food source for them. And it's just, it's so profound. And then other tribes, when I was in the Pacific Islands, most of their diet is sweet potatoes, hardly no meat at all. 90% of the Dani tribe live on sweet potatoes, and they revere the pig. And in the Dani tribe, the word Wam means pig. And so they named their region Wamina. They love the pig so much. So they really don't want to kill the pig, but they will, and they can't fish because they live so high up in the mountains. So there's wild pigs everywhere you go. And they'll kill a pig maybe once a month and they'll eat that, but that's their only meat source. But I will say, in terms of if I want to look at who is the most pristine health, their dentition, their oral health was lacking. They were missing so much of their teeth. Their skin was sagging. They were aging very quickly, even though they did have elders that were very old, but they were so frail. To me, I felt like I looked large to them. Some of them were so tiny in their aging. But again, just as Weston A. Price said, I believe it's because they're lacking in the essential vitamin A and K2. They've got plenty of vitamin D because they're out in the sun all the time. And vitamin E, they're getting that as well in their plants and their fruits and things that they're eating. But it's the K2 and the A, I think that is their key, that they're just not getting enough. And I don't think that they're chewing, like they're getting this massive chewing that you get from, because they don't eat them raw. I've got a video of them. You can see how they're making, it takes forever just to build their ovens to cook their potatoes in. But they're not getting the chewing that the tribes who are eating these tough meat, the bones that they're eating. I think that's a huge piece to why their jaws, and again, research is proving this. So there's so much. There's so much to this. And I love that you're so focused on this. I'm so proud of you for your age to understand this. Bravo, honey! Just wonderful, wonderful.
Well, I just find so much value in it, like, and from every lens, it's almost like, there's been answers for everything.
Everything.
And all you need to do is look back. We're in a mental health crisis now, and there was no mental health crisis ever in history.
No.
They've had it figured out. They focus on spirituality, they focus on family and community and purpose, having purpose
Yes.
and eating the right diet. All the answers are out there.
And you know what? Interesting too. On that note, um, when I talk to the elders about aging and why they feel that they're this age, and they also said the purpose, peace. But the fact is that they know that they are so valued, and they know, and of course they said movement is powerful. They said you have to move, and they said we can squat to go to the bathroom because we're doing it every day. We're living as humans, so therefore, if I can teach everyone in this modern world, stop, like my chairs are only here for the people who come to visit me because they can't squat. I don't even sit in a chair. I squat. When I eat, I squat. I'm squatting now. I have a squatting bench that I work at here at my computer. And so it's just so powerful that when to hear these elders, when they say, and they talk about their teeth and the importance of it, and they aren't missing. The only two teeth they're missing is, a lot of the tribes, they will remove, because I think it's a thing of beauty, the lower teeth on the bottom. Some might remove one up here, but there's another reason for it. It's for medicinal purposes. If they get like lockjaw, they will make their tinctures from their plants, and in that little space, they can put the liquid through that space. This is all ancestral. It's brilliant what they hand down. That we, and I asked them, and I said, "Do you guys have depression? Do they have suicidal thoughts?" And they're like, "No." And now remember, this is all through translation because I have a translator wherever I go with me. And they're like, "No, why would we be depressed? We love our life." And I said, you wouldn't want to become modern like where we're from? And they did tell me. And I spoke with some who had gone in the Hadzabe tribe. And you can hear this on the videos I share. And I said, they said, some of us have left because we thought it was going to be really great to go out and, have running water and food. And they said, but we got so sick so fast and we didn't like it. And we came back and we're never going back. And I said, so you like living this hard life? And they said, but it's not a hard life. They said, we have food every day. It may not be meat, but they said, We are provided in nature with food every day. It is there available. And so for those of us who are confused, whether it's carnivore or vegan, every single tribe, even the mighty Maasai, who everyone thinks are carnivore, they are not. I've lived it, they are not. They mostly live on milk, raw milk, but they also do eat seasonal plants, seasonal fruit, and they also eat berries. Love honey. They love raw honey. But they use plants, are powerful. Every single one of them said, without plants, we humans would be extinct. And I believe that with all my heart and soul, because I know when I was there, I was so subjected to things I should have gotten extremely sick with. But because I was eating their food, drinking their tinctures that they consume every day, I knew I was in the best of hands. These people know how to live. They're ancestral. And so I knew if I was getting worms from all the raw things I was eating or all the unclean, knives and things, I was taken care of. If I was going to get malaria with all the bug bites I had, I was drinking their tinctures. I was safe. And I came home feeling so powerful, so powerful. And it was very healing also going by myself on a solo expedition to one of the most dangerous places in the world. To go as a female, I had a lot of hangups, a lot of baggage that I carried of unworthiness. And to go there and to prove to myself, with God holding my hand, girl, you're one strong woman. You've battled so many things. And that aha moment, I don't have to prove anything to anybody anymore. I am God's child. And I'm worthy. And I will, if I remain single the rest of my life, I'm not. Yeah, I've got God at the head of, he's my man. It's funny, look at this. This is my screenshot. This is, I don't know if you can see it. That's what it's on my phone. Okay. So my students who were not Christian based, they would say, is that your boyfriend? And I say, it is. That is my
Oh my, too funny. That's
boyfriend. but,
amazing.
but speaking about spirituality, the tribes, all the tribes have a spiritual being, whether it's nature, the Maasai have a god, Angai, but now about 90% of them are Christians. And they believe so much in the Bible, and they've had the Bible translated into their language of Ma. When I talk to the Hadzabi, they do not. They believe that nature is the realm. It's like they're, if you want to call it spiritual, because they don't really have a spiritual. And they were fascinated because they understood. It's like as soon as they met me, they knew there's something. Not yes, they aren't used to being around a white person at all anyway, but they knew there was something different. And they kept asking me, because I said to them, "What do you believe after death? What happens to you?" And they said, "Nothing. It's the end." I said, "Really?" And then they said, "Well, why? What do you believe?" I said, "Oh." I said, "There's this beautiful," I said, "I'm going to paradise." And they wanted to ask a lot of questions about that. They were fascinated by that because it's never been something they thought about. They did not think about that at all. And so it was fascinating to touch on all the realms of what is health to the different tribes, because they all have different perspectives. But they still all felt, so the spiritual piece they kind of had, depending on the tribe, but they still felt it was, whether it was plant-based or meat-based, that their food was very important to them. But they also felt movement. You have to walk a lot every day. Do not sit. And then they said, your tribe. How close are you to your tribe? It's important that our tribe, that we all work for the good of the tribe. Even the elders have a role. You can see on my videos, you can see 100-year-old men with their spears or with their bow and arrows, leaving and walking at a very fast pace to go out and tend to whatever they're doing. They were not sitting there and other people were serving them. They were pulling their weight. They were doing their job, tending and maintaining. It's fascinating. It's just fascinating to see them. It's fascinating.
Amazing. Yeah, that's very good. Um, I don't want to wrap it up, but I think I'd like to ask for your final thoughts. Anything that you want to add to this discussion? Do you think that'd be important? I think we
I
had a
think we
pretty
covered
good
everything, darling.
overview of health. Yeah. Yeah. Anything that you might have missed that you want to add?
No, I think that's, just I think, again, we need to remember to be human, and ask yourself each day, is this really human what I'm doing? Am I really, and I'm not saying we have to live like the tribes, but I live as much as I possibly can like the tribes. And I feel that that's how I'm able to age so gracefully, or not age, but to get better, because I don't believe that we grow old. I believe we get better. And just focus on those things. Our mind is powerful. Our mind is so powerful, and our faith is so in gratitude, and just having a positive attitude. That's key in keeping negativity out of your life. Bitterness, um, forgiveness is powerful as well. But yeah, I think being as ancestral as possible, and love your children. To see the children, Oliev, they were just so alive. They were so like we were back in my day, growing up in the '60s. It was just we were so innocent. We didn't know all of these things, and what children are subjected to now in social media, it's their fragile minds cannot handle this, and that they're trying to question their genders at such an age. And I talked to this about the tribes, and they were shocked. They were like, "What? No, they know that they're a boy or a girl, and this is what it is." But because they aren't subjected to things, they aren't seeing things, they wouldn't think of it. They wouldn't think of these things. I never thought of those things growing up because we didn't have that, And it's only because what children are subjected to when they start to question things. And so when you look at the tribes, it's not existent. These things don't exist. Depression doesn't exist. Cancer does not exist. Alzheimer's does not exist. Diabetes, none of it exists. We have created this in the environments that we live in. And so we can remove those things by learning from the tribes. And that's what I choose to do. And so I hope that kind of wraps it up and brings it to an end. But our children, they're our future. And if we can't reel this in, we're going to be in a really bad situation. The children need to be rocked. They need to be sung to. They need to be able to see a human face. When I was teaching towards the end of my career, when I retired, compared to when I first began, the children could learn so quickly. They would come to school, they would give you eye contact, they were so respectful. By the end, they couldn't look me in the eye. They didn't know how to even where to put their tongue to speak. They didn't know how to put a T, a V, an F, because they weren't seeing people. An adult wasn't talking to them anymore. They're here, look at your screen, play on this. They're playing games. They have to have human communication, human contact to learn. It's frightening to see. Technology can be helpful, but it can also be detrimental and harmful to us, just as food can be. Whatever we choose, if we call it food, if it's processed. So again, all these, there's so many things. Oh gosh, I could talk for hours. I know you're saying no, cut it. But Leah, thank you, honey, for the opportunity. Thank you, and I
No,
hope
we'll
I shared
certainly have to
something
do this again.
valuable. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. We'll have to do this again in the future because I think your insights are invaluable. It's
Oh,
just
honey.
amazing hearing you speak. And so no, the pleasure's mine. Like, I appreciate you so much for coming on. If you could take a moment now to maybe tell the listener where they can find more of your work and learn more from you, and maybe help support you as well.
Thank you. Well, I don't do a lot because I try to keep not on social media very much. But this is our book. It's easy to purchase on Amazon. Um, this is our book. It's called The Ancestral Diet Revolution, and it's very powerful. It talks about the seed oils and processed food, and of course ancestral. Thinking about the tribes, and very very much based on what we learned from Weston A. Price. That was a Dr. Kenobi, and so that on Amazon and any bookstore online you can purchase it at. I'm mostly found on Instagram at Suzanne.Alexander.104, or on Facebook, and also on X or Twitter. I'm looking at what's that, TikTok, but that's a little too much for me. I'm like, oh no, 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 no. So mostly Instagram, because that's where I do all my live chats with the tribes. So whenever I'm on a expedition, that's where I do all my live chats, and people can join the chats, and you can ask questions live to the tribes and learn from them. And then it's powerful. It's so exciting. It's a rare opportunity to be able to talk with the tribes like this. So that's fine. Instagram's the place I would think for me to find me. But thank
Awesome.
you. Thank you.
We'll put those links down below too. That sounds amazing.
Thank you.
Sounds absolutely amazing. Um, Again, I appreciate your time so very much. This has been amazing. I loved it.
Thank you, honey.
Awesome. So I want to thank you all for listening. You should all know that this is not medical advice. This is for your informational purposes only, but also remember that we're all responsible, sovereign beings capable of thinking, criticizing, and understanding absolutely anything. We, the people in the greater forces, are together self-healers, self-governable, self-teachers, and so much more. Please reach out if you have any questions, criticism, comments, concerns, whatever it may be. You know where to find me on Instagram there. I love to chat with you guys. Let me know what you think about the episode and any thoughts at all, because I love chatting with you. These are so insightful. I learn more from you guys than I did in any book or text or whatever. So you guys are awesome. So I really appreciate y'all for checking it out today. If you want to give us a like, share, comment, review, subscribe, whatever you got to do in the platform you're on, that helps us grow, helps everything keep going. Sharing's really the best way. Share it with a friend, family member, whatever. All right, I appreciate you all. Remember, there's two types of people in the world: those who believe they can, those who believe they can't, and they are both correct. All right, guys, thanks for listening. Take care.